Good evening. This is the last Monday of April. Today's the 24th of April, 2023. Well, it's Monday, and already Tucker Carlson is out, and Don Lemon is out, and Oklahoma's governor is still out, at least out of touch with the rest of Oklahomans. That's a lot that's going on, and we'll have all the details on tonight's Hamilton Report, which starts right now. I'm delighted that you're joining us this evening for what I think will be a very strong discussion about a situation that is truly plaguing Oklahoma and particularly Oklahomans, something that our legislature doesn't seem too concerned about, nor our governor, and that is the homeless population living in Oklahoma. These are people without a place to call home. And we'll be looking at that in depth tonight. But first, the one of the best things I've heard in a long time is that Tucker Carlson was fired from Fox News. Now, this does not mean Fox News is going to be legitimate or care about anything other than ratings. But whatever the reason, honestly, I don't care. At least he is not filling the heads of older Americans. That's his primary base. With his lies, his insanity, his anti-woke, anti-black, anti-LGBT, anti-women rhetoric. Goodbye, mister. I hope to never hear from you again. But I'll tell you someone who was almost as happy as me, and that's the Lincoln Project. And here's how they posited his departure.
Fox News Media and Tucker Carlson have mutually agreed to part ways. Tucker's last show was this past Friday.
You take a collection of dumb, desperate people in middle age, hoping to keep on to their stupid TV jobs. You add scripts and some hairspray, and they just repeat the lies for you. It was not even close to an insurrection. Nicotine frees your mind, and THC makes you compliant and passive. Testicle that's crazy.
Talking to Trump is one of the great joys, one of the great animal joys.
Iraq is a crappy place filled with a bunch of, semi-literate primitive monkeys.
Shut up, racist!
Our civilization is superior. Let's pretend for a sec that our country had a news media that was interested in bringing you the news. What were these sheep doing when you apprehended them? They call you the egg hustler. Leprechauns exist not just on cereal boxes. M&Ms will not be satisfied until every last cartoon character is deeply unappealing and totally androgynous.
I love women, but they're extremely primitive. They're basic.
I gotta go. You should stick to the thigh-high boots. You're better at that. Maybe the orange M&M is a secret sexist himself. Your mask is making me uncomfortable. Why shouldn't I root for Russia, which I am? I'm not a Putin defender, despite what you may have heard. The end of the Lincoln Project. We can all celebrate that.
We want to thank Tucker Carlson for his service to the network.
I'm sorry, I just got to take a quick break and go cry in a closet while squeezing a stuffed animal.
Who's laughing now, Tucker? It's me. I'm laughing right now. Oh, thankfully, he's gone. But as Rachel Maddow tweeted so perfectly today, she said, I'll see you at 9 tonight on MSNBC. In other words, the good guys are still here. So that's my good news. The challenging news for Oklahomans, though, is that just recently our governor disbanded an interagency council on homelessness. He said they've come up with good ideas. They've been around for 20 years. It's time for them to go. Okay, that has not addressed the issues faced by Oklahomans. Now, when I'm saying faced by Oklahomans, I'm not talking about you if you go to a 7-Eleven in the morning for your coffee and newspaper, and someone asks you for change. That's not a crisis. But what is a crisis is the men, women, young people, and children who have no place for shelter in Oklahoma. Now, I want to show you, this is horrifying to me. This is what the governor said when he disbanded this committee. As long as I'm governor, we're not going to build housing. That's what he told reporters last week. He went on to say, though, when he was asked about his decision, he rebuked the idea that homelessness is a big problem in Oklahoma and claimed that many people refuse to get help that need help. So his answer is shut it all down and we'll help no one. I'm delighted this evening that my guest is smarter than I am on this topic. She is the Associate Executive Director of the Homeless Alliance based here in Oklahoma City. And it's my privilege to welcome Megan Muller to our broadcast this evening. Megan, thank you so much for appearing on the Hamilton Report tonight.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So I just laid out a bit of what's been going on. Our legislature has not done anything to address this issue this year. Thankfully, Tulsa has and Oklahoma City has, but these are just little drops compared to the growing problem. We drive through cities or through towns or along Route 66. It doesn't really matter where in Oklahoma, we will find people with no place to call home. How did your agency react to the governor's statements?
Yeah, I mean, we were disappointed as an agency that has participated with the GIT for, as you mentioned, over a decade. We were disappointed in his decision to disband that council. It was an unfunded council, so the actual cost to the state was very, very minimal, and I think the value that comes from major players among state organizations convening around a table with regularity, the value in that brain trust is significant. And so, we were definitely disappointed in that decision.
Well, and I think that you've hit on something very important, the brain trust, which comes from many different angles, because let's face it, there is not one solution to this crisis in Oklahoma. It requires us to look very closely at our mental health or lack thereof in Oklahoma. It causes us to look at things like drug and alcohol dependence and the way that causes problems for families. It has to do with rehabilitative services and education and training. So you're right. There are many components that go into this. Mm-hmm. But let's talk specifically about the Homeless Alliance for a moment. Mm-hmm. And how many clients are you serving right now?
So we operate a low barrier day shelter in Oklahoma City. We serve breakfast and lunch Monday through Friday, and we've been seeing close to around 300 people a day lately at our day shelter. I think in 2022, we saw an unduplicated, over 15,000 unduplicated clients come through our doors, whether that was for, shower and food at our day shelter or accessing one of our various housing or supportive employment programs. So, over 15,000 people, which we think is about 3 out of every 4 people who experience homelessness throughout the year in Oklahoma City.
Is this seasonally? Does it go up and down depending on the season?
Sure. There are lots of variables that impact as service providers what we see. So season, absolutely. Really cold weather, really hot weather. Oklahoma, we have both extremes. So that can definitely impact our numbers. We also see varied numbers depending on the time of the month. So early in the month, people receive Social Security benefits. Maybe their SNAP fills up. So they have less need for kind of emergency crisis services sometimes at the beginning of the month. And then as those those funds are depleted. Typically our numbers pick up towards the end of the month as well. So yeah, lots of those external variables that are constantly kind of impacting what we see.
I spoke to a man a couple of weeks ago. He and his dog were outside of a store, and he had a couple of bags with him, and that was all. And we got to talking, and I asked him how long he had been out there, and he said this time 3 years. The last time was 13 years. He's a veteran and has had a very hard time getting connected to services. Do you folks see many veterans come through your doors?
Yeah, typically about 10% of the population are veterans. So that's what we see here in Oklahoma City, and that's pretty consistent nationwide as well. About 10% of the population of people experiencing homelessness identify as veteran.
And sadly, the Republicans in the House have said that as a part of their budget that they're proposing would be a very substantial cut to veterans' benefits, including food benefits, housing, and no longer affording job training for unhoused veterans. So that's going to present even greater challenges for municipalities in how we can possibly serve the needs of so many people, because we have a lot. You just mentioned the number of people that you see who are veterans, and we have a lot of veterans who are sadly living on the edge, financially, emotionally, and that's going to have an impact. And if states are not ready to pick that up, what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, you hit on in your intro a bit of a soapbox issue for me, and that I don't think anybody chooses to be homeless. Whenever I'm talking to groups about the causes of homelessness, the underlying issues around homelessness, I always kind of hit on it's this perfect combination, or unfortunate combination rather, of large systemic issues, big social problems, a lack of social safety nets, and then individual circumstance. I always like the individual circumstance always comes last. Individual circumstances alone do not cause homelessness. We know this because I bet you can think of more people who are dealing with mental illness from the comfort of their homes than you do on the streets, right? We know people who deal with mental illness. We know people who deal with substance use, and they do it from their homes. It's not those things alone that cause homelessness. It's homelessness combined with lack of affordable wage. It's combined with a lack of affordable housing, high rates of incarceration, right? It's all of these things that are at play, working together to create this environment that is unfavorable to people. And I think you hit another nail on the head, just thinking about how many people are precariously housed and maybe don't even know how precarious the situation is. People who are right on the edge, who are one acute life disaster away from winding up on the streets. And the reality of the situation is, as service providers, a lot of times it feels like we're asked to do more with less. So, figuring out ways to respond to the crisis, when in reality, a lot of those resources just don't exist.
Yes. And you said something I think is very important. I read recently that the average Oklahoman, if they were hit with an unexpected $400 bill for a car issue or something in their residence or whatever it is, but a $400 unexpected bill conceivably would cause them to miss their next rent or mortgage payment. So that tells you how many people are just on the margin. We may look fine. We may have a job that doesn't pay much, but we get up and we go to work every day. But still, there's that gnawing reality that for any one of us, some unexpected life change or changes could put us in a situation where we found that we needed help as well.
Right.
This Sunday, 300,000 Oklahomans are set to lose their health care. And if you can't have health care, you can't be healthy. And if you can't be healthy, you can't continue to work. So I see this as maybe not immediate, but this is certainly going to impact your work, because if people can't get well, can't afford to get well or stay well, they're going to be left with no choice and no place to live.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. The pandemic really exacerbated a lot of these issues for us. It also came with an infusion of resources that our system is not used to having. But a lot of those resources are expiring or set to expire in the next 6 months or so. And that's really scary as a service provider community. Like you mentioned, losing health insurance. There was an increase in SNAP benefits that's going down back to pre-pandemic levels. And then again, just a lot of those like rental assistance programs, dollars that were coming into communities as a result of the pandemic. A lot of those go away in the next several months. And so I do think that we're going to continue to see the fallout. The pandemic was one of those events that was enough to push a lot of people up to that edge and over the edge. And so I do think we're going to continue to see that fallout for a long time, unfortunately.
Before I ask you my next question, one of our viewers offers this to you and Dan, saying that they appreciate the good work that you do. So I needed to pass that along. Thank you, Terry, for noting that. When it comes to the variety of people, and I'm sure that you see every type of person come through. Mm-hmm. What are we seeing today in terms of younger people? I'm talking specifically about teenagers or very early 20s, people who find themselves without a place to live. Is that a problem that continues to grow in Oklahoma like it does in many places around the country?
Yeah, I think it's hard for me to say if it continues to grow, because I think a big piece of that is that we're paying more attention to it. So I think, these are kids who've been there for a long time. There's just increased awareness of that specific subpopulation. And I think a lot of that increased attention is actually positive. So you can't end a problem you can't define, right? So by having that increased awareness, we're able to better define what youth homelessness looks like, and then craft interventions to address youth homelessness. Oklahoma City was the recipient of a grant through HUD. It's called the Youth Homelessness Demonstration Project. Tulsa recently was awarded that grant as well. So those funds are an infusion into our community dollars that we get from HUD that are intended specifically to address youth homelessness. And the really neat part about those funds is that the programs, the projects that are being funded by those dollars are defined by youth with lived experience. So it really amplifies youth voice, and the youth were involved in every part of that process. And so those projects in Oklahoma City have launched, which is really exciting. Everything from drop-in hours, so more accessible drop-in for youth who have nowhere else to go during the day, to permanent supportive housing, so PSH units specifically dedicated for this youth population, some diversion programs, so funds that are allocated to keep youth out of the homeless system. So there's some exciting stuff going on with youth, but to your point, we're definitely more aware of it, and it does seem to be a population that is on the rise. Pretty common thing that we see here in Oklahoma in particular is youth who identify as a member of the LGBTQIA population. And a lot of times homelessness is directly tied to that identity. and no longer being welcome in their homes. And so that's a really common thing that we see with youth who are experiencing homelessness in our community.
And you said earlier, and I'm so glad you brought up this point, that there are many factors that go into someone finding themselves as homeless. And also, there are things that are happening today that will impact this crisis in months and years to come. You mentioned the LGBTQ youth. With some of the horrifying things coming out of our legislature this year,
Yeah.
that's fomenting the base, and sadly, many in that base have children, and so whatever their ideas perhaps were before, they're hearing it now in the news and from our legislators as if this is the worst thing possible. So that's got to have an impact. The same way that taking dollars out of classrooms and not providing quality, affordable, or quality public education.
Yeah.
And so that may not affect what you see in your clients next week. It certainly could this summer or this fall, and almost definitely by next winter.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you possibly plan for all of the variables? It must be very challenging.
It's really challenging, yeah. And I think again, the pandemic was a really good example of how difficult it can be to plan. We had some ideas and things cooking, and then that happened, and it just completely derailed everything, as it did for people in lots of industries. But it feels hard to plan for tomorrow, much less 6 months down the road. That's just kind of been our MO lately. I think you bring up some really good points, though. Whenever I'm asked about preventing homelessness and homelessness prevention, my answer is usually like, how far upstream do you want to go with me? Because
Sure.
I really think, public education, that's a great example of homelessness prevention ultimately, right? And so, again, when I give talks in the community, a lot of times I'll bring up the ACE study, adverse childhood experiences. Oklahoma, unfortunately, we're not a good place for women, and we have a lot of traumatized children. We're not a great state for children either. And so I don't think that we should be surprised when we see poor adult outcomes, such as homelessness, or any of the issues that kind of feed into that and are co-occurring, right? Because if we look at the investment we're making way upstream, it's unfortunately lacking.
Oh, it certainly is. And you said this is not a great place for women. In fact, we
The
rank number
worst.
51.
Yeah, the very
Worst-
worst, in fact. Yeah.
Worst in the country. And so, and for whatever reason, I had not made the connection. And I'm grateful that you did, because if this is such a bad place for outcomes for women, then it cannot be a good place for outcomes for their children.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, that's logic. You cannot have an unhealthy or an unwell mother, or a mother who's struggling to keep her family together and work 2 or 3 or more jobs, and expect that everything is going to be fine with their children.
Or incarcerated,
Or
we're incarcerating people, at higher rates than anywhere in the world. And so, again, unfortunately, I think if you look at data, and if you look at things like the ACE study that looks at those adverse childhood experiences and how they impact health outcomes into adulthood, we shouldn't be surprised to see growing numbers of people sleeping outside in our communities.
What can our viewers do that will make a difference? Mm-hmm. Do you need volunteers? Do you need contributions? Tell us what you need.
Yeah, always. We're a nonprofit, so volunteers, money, those things are wonderful. Something I always tell people is just be a nice human. So like you mentioned, you were chatting with a person that you saw outside. I think that's really great. I think this population in particular is really used to being overlooked and ignored. And I get it, right? I know that it can be uncomfortable, and know how to engage with the person. It can be hard to be, confronted with human suffering. That is a hard thing for people. But I also think that there's a lot of power in acknowledging the existence of another person. So seeing a person outside and waving, it's my MO. My husband always makes fun of me because I wave at everyone that I see. But I just believe that there's power in that, in saying, like, you are a human being that is worthy of my attention, and I see you. I'm not going to just ignore you and walk by. So that's honestly, I think a really good place to start is to remember that at its core, homelessness is a human issue, that these are human beings. These are people's moms and dads and brothers and kids, who are living outdoors. I really think about a lot, what it would take for someone in my life to end up on the streets. What would have to happen for me to no longer be able to open my doors to, one of my loved ones? And the answer is trauma, right?
Absolutely.
It's just copious amounts of trauma. And I really think that if we can kind of shift our focus from what did you do to what happened to you, I think there's a lot of power in that too, in really trying to move through the world with that trauma-informed lens and perspective, and just remembering that, again, this wasn't a choice, that, behind these situations, there's a lot of trauma.
That's perhaps the most important thing that you shared with us tonight, that these are people. That it's not what they did or didn't do. It's what happened to you. And, we've all experienced trauma to one degree or another, but most of us, thankfully, have not had to deal with it over and over and over again as children. Before I let you go, I want to share something. This is a very long quote, so it's going to cover both of us up. But I do want to share this quote that was submitted this evening by Jana Lewis Harkins. This is from the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. There is nothing new about poverty. What is new, however, is that we now have the resources to get rid of it. Why should there be hunger and privation in any land, in any city, at any table, when man has the resources and the scientific know-how to provide all mankind with the basic necessities of life? There's no deficit in human resources. The deficit is in human will. The time has come for an all-out world war against poverty. Those words were spoken a half century ago, and nothing could be truer today. Megan, it has been a real joy to have you on this evening. Our time has moved very quickly.
Yeah.
But I'm going to assure you of this. I will continue to promote the Homeless Alliance and continue to encourage people to donate their time and their resources, and to go to your website, find out what needs exist and how they can plug in. And I'm going to ask also that you will come back and join us and keep us abreast of what's going on, and as importantly, what we can do to help. Is that a deal?
That sounds great. Thank you so much.
All right, Megan, it has been delightful visiting with you this evening. All best wishes as you continue to truly see the humanity behind the crisis. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Well, friends, that was a discussion that I'm grateful we had this evening, because it's something that impacts all of us. No, we're not all going to wind up homeless, but someone in our family will, someone in our circle of friends will. It's just a numbers game. So we've got to take care of each other, and we've got to make Oklahoma a better place to live. And the only way we can do that is by voting in people who care about people. It's time to change the composition of our legislators, of our state elected officials, of county and city and town governments, because we have to reckon with the fact that it's not Oklahoma. It's a place made up of Oklahomans, people who have real concerns, real needs, real hopes, and real dreams. And we can make that happen if we work together, if we build a party that can just shout from the rooftops, Oklahoma can be better and will be better. Before we go, I want to invite you to tune in next Monday evening. It's going to be a very special show. I will be in Enid, and we'll be broadcasting live from Enid, Oklahoma, where the good folks of the Enid Democratic Party are protesting the installation of someone who was duly elected, who happens also to be an extreme white nationalist who was the Oklahoma leader in the Charlottesville debacle that wound up killing people. He is a neo-Nazi, avowed to be so, and we will be in Enid direct and live to you, looking at what's happening there and how the people are raising their voices to make a difference in their community. And thank you for the differences that you make in our community. Thank you for tuning in tonight. And I just hope that something that we said tonight, something that you heard, was enough to make you want to share this video and these comments with your friends on social media, because the more people that are aware of the situations that we're all facing in Oklahoma and what the Democratic Party is doing on your behalf, the stronger our message, the stronger our party, and the stronger our state. On behalf of all of us at the Oklahoma Democratic Party, I'm Scott J. Hamilton, thanking you for tuning in. Please take good care of yourself, and I'll see you next Monday evening.